work of my teacher. Yes. And so that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah, we call that the moral dilemma. Who am I to respond to my teacher? But, well, this is academics. Yeah. All right. Once again, I say thank you for the privilege. A response on an essay titled Retelling Bible Stories for Christian Ethics and Social Action, Revisiting Narratology in West African Biblical Scholarship by Dr. Solomon Anam. Well, the first thing I have to look at is to see what is the thesis statement, or rather, what is the author's central argument of the paper. Sometimes the thesis statement is easily spotted. Okay, when the paper makes statements like this article, this essay, this paper argues for dash 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 dash. Once you see such a statement, then you can pick the argument of that paper from there. Okay, in this case, in this paper, there's no such. All right? And so I had to go through, to read between the lines to figure it out. Okay? It's not every paper that will tell you, okay, this paper, this article argues for this. And so when it is not there, of course it is always there. And so you must look for it. Because without getting the argument of that essay, or that paper, or the article, you will not be able to do justice to it. And so I have looked at it and have put it this way. The paper argues for a revisit of Old Testament narratives for Christian ethics and social action in West African biblical scholarship. Okay, having done that, then I now move to assess the argument, okay? The essay's argument. How organized, how coherent, what is the flow of thought? How smooth is it? Or how long is it? Okay? So I would say that having looked at it, the paper is organized in structure. It's organized in structure. Okay? That's one. That is to say that the paper is well organized structurally. Okay? All right. And then it is coherent in discourse of issues. Okay? It is coherent in discourse of issues and smooth flow in thought. Right from the background study to the argument in defense of the thesis statement. And so that is one of the first things that I have looked at, and this is very important. The structure, the coherency from one part of the essay to the other. How are they fully related? How is the flow? How is the coherency between one paragraph or one topic to the other? So I have stated this clearly that all these are perfect. All right. After assessing the essay's argument, then I looked at what is the quality, the relevance, and effectiveness of the evidence used to support the argument. Okay? And so there are about three things here: quality, relevance, and effectiveness of the evidence used to support the argument. We started with the argument and we're moving all through. Okay? So the first thing is that the essay apportions apportions more than 70% of the work in defense of the argument, beginning with how the West African people groups have in the past used narrative or storytelling to mold character and handle moral and ethical issues, as well as how this culture has drifted away, making the revisit imperative. And so this is one of the qualities of the paper. You know, it has, this is the beginning of the defense of the argument. I don't need to say much because he has presented it. And so he starts the defense by saying, okay, look, this is what is obtainable, what used to be obtainable in the African societies or West African societies concerning narratives, storytelling, tells by the moonlight and all this. He mentioned all this the day before yesterday. And so he continues the defense by saying that, okay, but shortly after, you know, this drifted away, all right, and so the drifting away from the normal, the culture that is known becomes imperative for this essay, in the sense that how can we bring it back? Okay, so the paper advances several useful hermeneutical approaches for analyzing biblical narratives for Christianity, ethics, and social action. However, a practical analysis exercise of one of these approaches with a biblical narrative text would have given the paper a greater quality, relevance, and effectiveness, as well as a solid defense of the argument. Well, I say here that that could be another second edition of the essay. All right? Yeah. That could come up as a second edition of the essay to show in details how that revisit, you know, plays out, how it is going to be done. And after this, what are the support or counter arguments in the defense of the argument? Of course, he interacts with scholars. Okay, does he support them? Does he say no to them? And, you know, all this in the process of his defense of the argument. Number one, the paper supports these approaches with its own unique approach. Yeah, he presents a number of approaches, okay, and then adds his own, and that is excellent, isn't it? After saying this scholar has done this scholar has done this scholar proposed this, and then he now brings his own, one he also has prepared. That's one. Then, secondly, the paper has no argument. Okay? The paper has no argument, interaction or engagement with any of the scholars' opinions. You are required, if you engage, or rather, if you quote a scholar, sometimes you need to engage that scholar. The views, the opinions, the idea of that scholar. Yeah, of course, I said earlier that he supports them. But we are saying that I'm saying here that you don't need to support all of them. You need to find one or find a reason to say critically, of course, to say, look, this scholar says this, but I think it is supposed to be this. So I add here and say that the paper has no argument, interaction, or engagement with any of the scholars' opinion. This is, there is no counter argument, so to say, okay? It accepts every thought of the scholar referenced and critical discourse. and critical discourse. That's what I'm saying here. They have seen and critical discourse in the arguments or in the references or with the discussions with scholars. Now, corresponding to the essay. Now, corresponding to the essay, it's a continuation, of course. Summary of the main points. The paper begins stating that narratives or storytelling is a preferred genre because it has been used successfully to mold character and virtue, teach good morals, and discourage evil vices in the West African society. Okay, so then the paper explains how this culture in West Africa has drifted away as a result of Western influence, slave trade, colonization, scientific and systematic reading of the scripture. Okay? These are the elements that has made the culture that all of us, especially with the elderly one, know. Okay? The young ones probably hardly, especially those who go in the township, hardly get to know this. But some of us know this very well, and we were taught actually through this storytelling. And when we come to it, I'll say something about that. Okay, so the paper then surveys approaches to narratology for West African biblical scholarship, and finally suggests approaches for responsible hermeneutics in the biblical narrative for Christian ethics and social action. So this is just a brief summary, starting from the beginning and right down to the end. And basically, it's all about defending the argument or the thesis statement. Now, the reconstructive feedback of essay strength and weakness. Okay, so I'll start with strength. The essay is a very relevant research in view of the current moral decay in the society, the young and the elderly alike. And that is nothing new to us. We know what's happening in society. Both the adults and the young, we are morally bankrupt. Most of us, morally bankrupt indeed. The second, the choice of Old Testament narrative the choice of Old Testament narrative resonates with the African use of storytelling to teach morals and character modeling. Okay, when we get down a little, we'll explain more of this. Then C, the essay sufficiently presents several hermeneutical approaches to interpret the narrative genre. And then another strength of the paper is that the essay contributes to ongoing discussion on anthropology. Now, the weaknesses. The essay agrees with all the scholars and critically, e.g., John Burton's assertion that Old Testament is reticent to drawing moral conclusions to stories it presents. Yeah, of course, that's true. But in another way, it's not quite true. What I'm saying here is that the writer just agrees with Burton with what he says. Yeah, let's take, for example, I say here, no, the moral lessons of the stories are often clear enough, requiring no further conclusion. If I were the one, that's what I would respond to Burton. Okay? For example, Abel and Cain. The narrative of Abel and Cain is very clear. You don't need to hear what to tell you that this person is wrong or morally wrong or this person is morally right. You can figure out yourself. The same thing Joseph and Jacob and Esau. What happened? The narrative between them. You don't need anybody to. Yahweh does not need to tell you that Jacob has to take over his brother. That's the way we understand it most of the time. Okay? But of course, Yahweh is, the Bible didn't say anything like that all through. Probably at a later time, prophets, we see a statement that Esau I hate, Jacob I love. Okay? So you don't need to wait and expect that the Bible will tell you that this action that this person has done is morally wrong and this other one is morally right. You have, once the story is clear and clean, you should be able to figure it out yourself. And so I'm responding to Bolton in that way. And I'll tell you that even our local storytelling that we receive as young people that teaches us morals, they don't at the end tell you exactly what is wrong and what is wrong. You should figure it yourself. From the story, it's always very clear that you should be able to figure it yourself. All right, so let's move on. The hermeneutical approaches lack sufficient details to make the argument practical and attractive. Okay? Yeah. Well, this is theory. Yeah. I would have loved to see how these approaches, not in details, but something that can help somebody to understand it better. And so I made that statement here that the hermeneutical approaches lack sufficient details. Well, then the paper is unable to explain to its readers how the retelling or the visiting from the Old Testament narrative text actually play out in real case scenario. There's no single text taken from the narratives of the Old Testament that I could see in that essay. Even if it is a short example, like I've just noted, okay, it's not there. No even biblical text, I suppose. I suppose. Yeah, I may be wrong, but I think so. Okay. No. Yeah. Then. All right. So you are talking about. I hope the time. If I'm driving, let me go so that I hurry up. Yeah? But I'm almost done. What I'm trying to say is that we're talking about narratives in the Old Testament. Okay, narratives is quite a large one. From Genesis and all that, even historical narratives. I hope you are hearing me. Sorry, it looks like I'm going away from the. Sorry. And so I expected that even just take one case study, and present it. All right. Now let's move on and say how I engage critical thinking by analyzing the essay's argument, identifying potential bias, and considering alternative, perspectives. So, is there any biases? Is there, any essay arguments that I need to say more than what I said? And above all, what are other alternatives that could be presented? Right. So, the bias of the use of first person singular in the essay. Okay. See, okay? Yeah, in the essay. All right. Then, secondly, I'm proposing a newer method of Old Testament studies that can effectively analyze the narrative for its ethics in ethics. Okay. and it is narrative ethics. Simply, narrative ethics is a new methodology, okay, for analyzing Old Testament ethics. Now, narrative ethics has some constituent parts. Moral dilemma. You know, initially I told you that for me to respond to my teacher is a moral dilemma. And so this is one of the things that you consider when you, because for every action or inaction, there is a moral, implication. Okay, are we together? For every action or inaction, there is a moral implication. If you take the action, okay, there is an implication. If you don't take action, there is also an implication. And so with that, you're always in a moral dilemma. What am I going to do? I'm going to take this action. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? I'm just trying to tell you how I would use narrative ethics in this particular essay. I'm just proposing another alternative. And so moral dilemma, sorry, every choice of action or inaction has moral and ethical implications. Then we have memory and themes, cognitive processes with past experiences, okay, and that is part of the narrative ethics. Memory and themes. Okay? You respond and you continue. You look back and see what has happened, what has transpired. And that will help you take also either moral or immoral decision. Okay. Then we have character and value. That's image of Yahweh in us. The image of Yahweh in us helps us to do what is morally right, isn't it? Anyone who does what is morally wrong is deviating from the image of Yahweh, which he has built up with, the ability or the good that is in him, which he has given us as part of the image we have in him. And so, character and virtue is one of the elements that we look at narrative ethics. You have also moral imagination and empathy. The formation of mental image of events or things which may be real or unreal, and which yields emotion. Okay, so this methodology could be used even in poetic literature, poetic ethics. Yes, but in poetic ethics, of course, we use it as an approach, while in narratives, it's actually a methodology. All right. Then let me just conclude. I think I'm done with it. Okay. The conclusion should suggest the best approaches. After listing all the approaches, you will have told us that in all this, I think this is the one that is more applicable. I suggest or I prefer, amongst the methodologies or the approaches he has presented. So that's just what I observed. Then finally, conclusion. Telling the Old Testament narrative for Christian ethics and social action in West African biblical scholarship is very key in view of the current loss of morals, character, and virtue in the society. However, the essay must engage the requisite methodology for quality of the work to be fully appreciated. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, before I sit down, just me as reverend. I'm not a reverend. Thank you very much. Yeah, Engineer Morris. Okay.